Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pete Daly, CEO and publisher of the U.S. Naval Institute, and I just wanted to welcome all our members, guests, and friends here to our 146th annual meeting. We've also got several of our directors and trustees in the audience, and I especially recognize them. And I'd also, at this time, like to ask the audience to stand up, and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Admiral Jim Stavridis has a long association of engagement with the Naval Institute going back to the time he was a midshipman. He's been writing for Proceedings since 1977 and has since authored 46 articles and comment and discussion pieces. He's written and published 7 books just with the Naval Institute. He's done more. And he just recently completed his oral history. No one embodies what this organization is all about more than him. And so I just ask him to come up to the stage with that introduction and give us a few opening remarks. Admiral Stavridis.
Thanks, Pete. Let me start by getting the microphone down to a normal person's height. Always a chore I have to undergo. Wonderful to be here, Pete. Thanks for those 2 gracious comments. And I, too, want to welcome so many friends and supporters of the Naval Institute and those who have chosen over the years to read, to think, to write, and then to have the courage to publish. And those are 4 distinct lines of effort. And I hope that in the end, that is the most important aspect of this Naval Institute. As I wrap up 6 years as chairman, I am term limited, and I want to just give 2 minutes of thought to several things that I think are very challenging that we ought to be writing about, thinking about, and addressing. And 3 of them are kind of convergences. The first one I think we ought to be observing is geopolitical, and it is the increasing convergence of China and Russia. I think that is a very interesting phenomena that is just beginning to manifest itself. And it kind of hit my radar about a year ago when I saw photographs of Chinese destroyers, Russian destroyer operating together, not in the Pacific, that would be too obvious, right? They were operating in the Baltic Sea together. Last fall, we saw the largest military exercises since the end of the Cold War on the Siberian border, hundreds of thousands of Russian troops, but more interestingly, 10,000 Chinese troops. That convergence, particularly as we all acknowledge the reemergence of concern about great power politics, is worth studying. It is worth reading about, thinking about, writing about, and publishing about. Second convergence. We have been engaged now for almost 2 decades in a struggle against global violent extremism. That is an ongoing concern. What worries me is the convergence of cyber and cyber criminal activity and cyber terrorism activity alongside the emergence of what I've called elsewhere terrorism 3.0. This is the Islamic State. 1.0, 1980s, Europe, Red Brigades, Baader-Meinhof Gang, Peru, Sendero Luminoso, individual, relatively small national terrorist organizations. 2.0, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram. Terrorism 3.0 is emerging, and they, I predict, will use cyber with lethal effect. And I would argue we just saw that in Sri Lanka. And that is where that light went on for me, of those two issues converging. On that as well, we ought to read, think, write, and publish. And finally, perhaps the broadest of all convergences, I think, and they're literally already conjoined, are the challenges of the oceans, the environment, the health of the ocean, the warming of the oceans, the concerns we all ought to have about the reality of climate change, converging with a specific region, and that is the Arctic. When you think of those two sets of issues, which touch the geopolitical, environmental, technological, again, we ought to be reading, thinking, writing, and publishing. All of those things are only antecedents to the work we must do. But as I look out at the Naval Institute in our almost 150-year history, we have so often been that antecedent activity that spurs action, that creates effect, that is powerful for the nation and for the world. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, it's important to recognize that, thank you, Admiral Stavridis, and it's important to recognize that this annual meeting is made possible by our three sponsors, USAA, Leonardo DRS, and Lockheed Martin. We thank them for helping make this a class member engagement event. Thank you. The state of the Naval Institute is strong. We've made tremendous progress on our mission objectives, which I'll cover in more depth further on. But we finished 2018 with a bottom line of plus $15 million. And fundraising for the conference center factored big in this, and we'll talk about that soon. 2018 was a record year for our foundation overall. Remember, our Naval Institute's foundation's sole purpose is to support the Institute. Membership is off a bit from our high of over 50,000, and we're working strategies to get that back. I'm confident we will. So, election results, very important part of this evening's activities. And we hail our newly elected board members, Christine Fox. The Honorable Christine Fox is Assistant Director for Policy and Analysis at Johns Hopkins APL and is the senior-most woman to serve in the Department of Defense. Admiral Mike Rogers, former Commander, U.S. Cyber Command, former Director of the National Security Agency and Commander of 10th Fleet. Lieutenant General Robert Whaler Walsh, former Commanding General of Marine Corps Combat Development Command, Combat Development Deputy for Combat Development Integration to the Commandant, and served as an aviator in combat tours forward in Iraq and Afghanistan. We have several of our directors here tonight. I mentioned that earlier, but I think I've got Philip Bilden here, Vice Admiral retired Sally Bryce O'Hara, Captain Holly Harrison. We've also got Guy Snodgrass, of course, Admiral Stavridis, and I don't know if I know John Morton's here, and Sandy Winnefeld, present. Sandy, welcome. And also we have our Navy Board of Directors Liaison, Jim Lobline, here with us tonight, so welcome. We owe a major debt of gratitude to the following directors who are ending their term of service on the Board of Directors: John Allen, Vice Admiral retired Dirk Debink, U.S. Navy Reserve, and Mr. Kenny Klepper. These are volunteer positions, and these are important and busy people who give their time freely to support the Naval Institute, for which we're deeply, deeply grateful. Admiral Jim Stavridis' term as board chair ends in late July. So this will be his last annual meeting as chair of the board. And I just wanted to say, for a personal standpoint, and on behalf of the staff, it's been a tremendous privilege to work closely with him over the past 6 years, and they've gone by like that. And this has been a period of tremendous progress for the Institute. And the board is going to give him a proper send-off in a few months, but I wanted to let members know that this will be a time when we can thank Admiral Stavridis in a public way and thank him and recognize him for his leadership as our board chair. So, Admiral, please stand and be recognized by the members. Our editorial board is elected annually, and we add some appointments for warfare, community balance, and for service, sea service balance. In bold are the new members since the last meeting. You can see we have a lot of new members, and those with asterisks indicate those that were elected by the members. The Ed Board does incredible work to provide a peer review, an all-important peer review for the articles that are submitted to proceedings, and they also do a tremendous amount of heavy lifting in support of in judging our essay contests. We thank the departing editorial board members for their superb service. And this year, again, we had a large turnover. And is Holly Harrison here? Is she in the audience? Holly, you're hiding. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. I'd like to acknowledge the terrific work of our editorial board chair. And Holly is in a similar position to Admiral Stavridis. She's here and she's still on the team, but she's going to leave soon. And she's leaving soon to command a new national security cutter in Hawaii. That's a great deal. And I'd like to have Holly stand and be recognized. Thank you, Holly. We also welcome new members to the Board of Trustees, the Foundation. It's required by our bylaws that we have one member of the Board of Directors also serve on the trustees, and John Greenard, who's not able to be here tonight because he's out of town, but he's been kind enough to accept that role, and we thank him. And Heather Lancaster took over as the EVP for Development this past fall, and that makes her a trustee ex officio and also the Chief Operating Officer, and Heather's doing terrific work. I also want to see, I saw him just walk in, Greg Glaros is here tonight, one of our trustees. Greg, welcome. So, hot off the press is our strategic plan, and we've given everybody a copy at your seat, and we're going to go through these 5 objectives. I won't read them to you, but I think I'll just step through them very quickly. Objective 1 is encouraging critical thinking and facilitating debate on issues essential to the sea services and global security. And one thing that ties so many of us in this room together is service at sea, where mission-level orders are the norm and self-assessment is all important. The culture of command by negation assumes a bias for action and an embracing of critique. So you see this article at top, How We Lost the Great Pacific War by Captain Dale Relage, U.S. Navy, first prize winner in the 2017 General Prize Essay Contest. And it was published in May of this year in Proceedings. It is a great example of critique and critical thinking. And the Naval Institute is very proud of our role in publishing thought leaders like Dale Relage. At the bottom is a message to the mess: earn back sailors' trust. This is a blog article by Master Chief Bill Houlihan. It has been read online over 75,000 times. It challenges the chiefs and the status quo, and the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, Russ Smith, has used this for an important discussion with the Navy's Chiefs Mess and their efforts and where they should focus. It demonstrates the growing reach and connection that the Naval Institute has with the enlisted communities, the senior enlisted communities especially, in each of the sea services. We need more articles like these. Objective 2 is advancing naval professionals and their profession. The content we produce is at the heart of the profession and professional development. We're always looking for new ways to advance the profession in an ever-changing environment. 2 years ago, we first published the Parent's Guide to the U.S. Navy, and the feedback has been positive, very positive. And the Navy Recruiting Command recently contracted with the Institute to deliver the Parent's Guide in a new and creative fashion that provides an app for a continued dialogue instead of a one-and-done book delivery. The Parent's Guide has been so successful, we've also got the manuscript and work in hand for Parent's Guide to the Marine Corps, and we have one following that for the Coast Guard. Pictured at top is the new 3rd edition of Fleet Tactics, authored by a legend, Captain Wayne Hughes, and a good friend of the Institute, Rear Admiral retired Bob Gurrier. That book is one of those books that people said, we want the next edition, and we took a while, but we got it done, and it's been very strong. And you see the Chief Petty Officer's Guide there on the right, and we brought retired Fleet Master Chief Paul Kingsbury on staff in the fall, and he's high energy, highly networked, and a talented writer, and he's the author of the Chief Petty Officer's Guide, and he's also the author of the soon-to-be published Petty Officer's Guide. Objective 3, preserve and learn from naval history. Preserving and learning naval history is critically important, but it doesn't have to be dry and dull. There's some real there in combining information and entertainment, and I think we can combine those. We're very conscious of reaching new audience in different ways. So you see there on the lower left, The Dead Reckoning. That's our new graphic novel imprint for the Naval Institute Press. And it's reaching a broad audience in terms of age, and it's also reaching a much higher percentage of women than we predicted. Pictured on the left is the classic All Quiet on the Western Front. Night Witches has received glowing reviews from NPR, Publishers Weekly, and Booklist. Not pictured is another book, Machete Squad, that's been nominated for an Indie Award. The Indie Awards recognize Best Graphic Novel, and we'll find out in June how that came out. Upper right, you see a blog post from the Naval History blog, The Death of the Lone Ranger, USMC. It's about Lee Powell, the iconic Lone Ranger, who enlisted in the Marines in 1942 and was ultimately killed in action in Tinian in 1944. This blog received significant attention and was also featured on National Public Radio. So in the lower right there, you've got World of Warships. And we're continuing our commitment to meet audiences where they are. And we think the online gaming community has vast potential. And the World of Warship games, I don't play it, but the World of Warship game is played by millions of people in North America and tens of millions of people around the world. And the game features engagements from World War II. And there's a standard order of battle, and there's also, you can buy additional capabilities. And realism and accuracy are very important to this particular group of people. And they need information about World War II ships, and we can be the source of that information. So we're working partnerships with them to do just that. If they need books on World War II, we're here to help. Objective 4, broaden the Naval Institute's reach. So we're looking at ways to increase the frequency and breadth of our conference events. We're planning to expand out to the West Coast. Again, we've got West in San Diego. We're going to do an event in San Francisco later this year. West 2019, just mentioned, was a big success. We had over, well, almost 8,000 people through the door over 2.5 days. And we had a bigger percentage of uniformed and government civilians attend. We've continued our DARE program. And this is a program where we ask the Sea Service chiefs to take turns asking 2 questions to get direct feedback from a younger audience. And this year it was the Coast Guard's turn, and the first question was retaining a talented military workforce, and the second question was about addressing and correcting risk aversion. At the last minute, the Commandant was unable to attend because of a memorial service for a fallen Coast Guardsman, but Vice Commandant Charlie Ray came in his stead. And the quality of the presentations and the valuable feedback was superb. It's super evident that this program is working. People are always amazed that if they can get direct chance to talk to a senior person, as opposed to having everything move up the chain of command and get bent, folded, stapled, mutilated, it gets changed. And the young people really appreciate this, and I think our service chiefs who have now gone through this, each of them really appreciate this. Okay, our essay contest is strong. We had 853 total essay submissions in 2018. And two contests I'd like to highlight are the Enlisted Prize Essay Contest and the Midshipmen and Cadet Essay Contest that open us up to new audiences. In total, in 2019, we're going to run 15 contests, and we're diversifying the essay topics to ensure that we reach beyond the traditional officer-centric focus. We launched our newly redesigned website at the end of February, and feedback regarding the user experience has been very positive. With responsive design, we're much better on mobile, and the site itself is lightning fast and has higher resolution images. We rolled out a single cohesive navigation bar across all our platforms. Well, we've got two to add, which are the Naval Institute blog and the Naval Institute history blog. But having that common access bar brings the elements of the Naval Institute together and emphasizes our core brand. Also, later this year, look for a redesign of the U.S. Naval Institute News, USNI News site. Objective 5, building resilience, seizing strategic opportunities, and protecting our independence. The power to inform, convene, and inspire underpins all our objectives in the strategic plan. It's how we give great ideas the financial support to turn them into actions. And this is the first ever comprehensive campaign we've done. And by comprehensive, I mean all aspects of the Institute. I mentioned the conference center, but it's more than that. It's the annual giving combined for a total rolled up 3-year campaign. The Cornerstone is the capital project to build the conference center as an addition to Beach Hall, our headquarters on the yard at the Naval Academy. This in itself will be the largest project the Naval Institute probably ever does. And I'd like to play a short video to show you what it is we're building. So this is the site behind Beach Hall. To the right is where you normally come in, up at top of the hill. And one of the things we knew we needed to do was to bring together and provide a home field for our visitors. The Naval Academy is like a large electromagnet with all these people coming there, but we didn't have a way to interact with them. And we got 3 laps of commentary from an ex-Disney Imagineer, Brand Farron, who many of you have met. He said, think of this as a semicircular, circular studio from which you can beam out content. And we've also included a broadcast studio to do things like, you know, a stand-up on Bloomberg. This is a topside area, which is really just an area to include a place to feed the guests for all-day events. And that was one of the key comments we received, by the way. They said, if you're in the mid-Atlantic with the heat and humidity, you want to be able to heat and cool that space. So we took aboard that comment. This is our brick wall, which we'll come back to later, but it's our, if you buy a brick and you want your name on this, that's the place where that'll be cited. This is the connection between the new and the old. You're flying through onto the 3rd deck of Beach Hall, and now you're going out to the Vice Admiral William D. Hauser Battle of Midway Memorial Terrace. It's a beautiful way to connect these two. This area here is an example of some of the parts of Beach Hall itself, the current building that'll be renovated. Then we come back down, and we're going to walk down the stairs here and go down to the 1st deck. And one of the winning ideas about this design was to use the 1st deck to support the auditorium. We're going to take a walk here by our donor wall. This is our major donor wall for 50,000 and above. We'll come back to that. And then come down to the first deck. And this is the site on the first deck where the Naval Academy Foundation used to have spaces. And this will be all opened up and become a welcome and reception area, an area for 4 of the 5 breakout rooms that are associated with this, for catering. And we haven't put our message through every bit of this yet, but that's part of the plan, is to tell the Naval Institute story as you walk around. We also thought you should be able to buy a book. For those who've been to Beach Hall, you recognize the split foyer entrance, but the first deck looks a little different. We go into the conference room, 400 plus seats. We talked about multi-use space. Do we want to do weddings and bar mitzvahs, or do we want to do professional symposium? And we decided to optimize for professional symposium. But when we go in, you'll see there's fixed seats. We did a lot of it. We paid a lot of attention to acoustics and lighting, and wanted to make the views terrific. And the seats may look like the fixed seats that are in your high school auditorium, but I assure you, these are the business class version with the width and leg room that goes with it. And there's also fold-up desks. You can see on the back of the chairs the chance to buy a chair and memorialize somebody. This is the look of it. This is a rendering, but I like these. I like the way the architects did this. It's very difficult at the Naval Academy or in Annapolis to put this all together right now. And we also have a capability to do classified on a one-time per-use waiver basis because we optimized for that. One last look onto the first deck, and then coming out to the main entrance. We think this is going to make a huge difference in becoming more than just a proceedings magazine and a P.O. box for midshipmen, a place to engage, and all our other constituencies. And there it is. Okay, building this conference center would not have been possible without the incredible support of Andy and Barbara Taylor and the Crawford Taylor Foundation. As principal donors to the center, they named this in honor of their family patriarch, Jack C. Taylor, who himself is a member, donor, and supporter, was a member, donor, and supporter of the Naval Institute. We're honored they chose this project to name it after their father. Jack Taylor was a decorated Navy fighter pilot during World War II, an entrepreneur, a business leader, and philanthropist. Jack is a recognized American success story who embodied Navy values and to his last day credited the Navy for his success. After flying combat duty in the Pacific Theater during World War II off the USS Essex CV-9 and the Enterprise CV-6, Jack returned to St. Louis and founded his rental car business. And in 1957, he named it Enterprise Rent-A-Car in honor of USS Enterprise CV-6, from which he flew. Jack once told me that after landing a Hellcat on the pitching deck of a carrier, starting a business didn't seem like such a big deal. He was very believable in this. So I mentioned earlier we have this celestial donor wall as both an artistic feature and a way to recognize our donors who give us a contribution at the $50,000 level or more. The wall depicts the night sky on the night of 9 October 1873. It can give us the exact celestial picture now, and we thought this was no better way than to do this and recognize our key donors. It covers all 3 floors, as you saw, of that main stairway area, and the names will change color based on the standpoint of the viewer. And the celestial wall is just one place where you can honor a loved one or do something in your name. And we have donor opportunities anywhere between $1,000 and 6 million. And if anybody wants to do 6 million, they can come up right afterwards and discuss it. Yeah, Admiral Stavridis said right now, that's true. Today, I'd like to highlight 2 other naming opportunities at the Conference Center. And you just saw on the video, just inside the rooftop terrace, will feature a donor wall with names. These are the brick donor wall contributors. And then in the main auditorium, you saw on the back of the chairs, you can engrave a metal plaque that's permanently affixed to the back of the chairs. And this rare capital project presents an opportunity for meaningful and lasting opportunities to recognize your support, allows us to remember and honor classmates, shipmates, families, and friends. So how's the campaign going so far? So remember, this is a comprehensive campaign. This is not just the Conference Center. This is everything we're raising over 3 years. So we've raised about 2/3 of our comprehensive campaign goal to date, and this is great progress for 16 months in. We feel confident in how far we've come, and we're building on our positive momentum, and hope every person here today and every member of the organization will think about becoming part of our campaign. We're doing big things that require vision and strategy and investment, and this is the moment to stretch. And I hope you'll stop by the foundation table out in the reception area after our program today. So got a minute, I think I've got a couple minutes here for questions if there are any, but that concludes my prepared remarks, and I open up the floor. Okay, so hearing none, I will transition and ask our Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Proceedings, Captain Bill Bray, to come up and begin our first group of awards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Admiral. I'm Bill Bray, Deputy Editor-in-Chief of Proceedings. I'm very excited to be part of the Institute and part of this amazing team. Today I'm going to announce the award winners for the first Midshipmen and Cadets Essay Contest. As Admiral Daly mentioned, it was a great success, sponsored with General Dynamics Information Technology. I'd like to recognize and call up Major General retired Bobby Wilkes, if he's here. Yeah. We had 82 submissions from across the country, midshipmen and cadets across the country. Very, very successful. I have to tell you, it was gratifying to work with these young men and women that are the future of our nation and our military, extremely intelligent and some excellent writers. Our third place winner was Midshipman Second Class, Ben Kiakia, who is at Brown University and drills with Holy Cross, the Holy Cross unit in Worcester, Massachusetts. Come on up, Ben. I'm going to get a photo. Admiral, do you want to come? No.
Congratulations. Well done. Good. Let's get a photo. Great. How about a round of applause?
Our second place winner is Midshipman First Class, about to be commissioned in the Marine Corps, Chase Hammer from Norwich University. And for his essay, Influence, C2 and Ethics Influencing Marines in an Incredibly Dispersed Combat Environment.
Thank you very much. Well done.
One more shot.
Great. Good job. Thank you very much.
And our winner is Midshipman Third Class Chris Relag from Stanford University for his essay, Strength in Numbers, Returning the Fleet to a Wartime Deployment Stance. Chris is the son of retired Captain Dale Relag, who's won several essay contests for the Institute.
Hey everybody, I'm Rick Russell, Director of the Naval Institute Press, and it's my pleasure to announce the Naval Institute Press Author of the Year. This year's award winner is Trent Hone for Learning War, the Evolution of Fighting Doctrine in the U.S. Navy, 1898 to 1945. Using the unique and interdisciplinary perspective of a complex adaptive systems, Learning War examines the U.S. Navy's doctrinal development from the Spanish-American War through World War II. To quote Trent, victory in the Pacific War was a result of the Navy's ability to foster evolutionary changes in its doctrine, an ability that had been developed and refined over prior decades. Learning War describes how the creation of a sophisticated learning system in the early years of the 20th century led to repeated innovations in the development of surface warfare tactics and doctrine. It demonstrates the Navy's critical war-winning ability rapidly to modify doctrine in light of experience, for example, with the shift from a centralized battle fleet to a distributed collection of mutually supporting carrier forces, and the critical introduction of the Combat Information Center as two of its significant examples. In light of current great power competition at sea, Learning War draws profoundly important conclusions on not only how the Navy defeated a major rival sea power and succeeded in becoming the most effective naval force in the world, but also how contemporary organizations can exploit high-velocity changes in technology in their pursuit of success. Not surprisingly then, Learning War has captured the attention of CNO, and the book has been added to the CNO reading list. Please join me in congratulating Trent Hone for his marvelous achievement.
Congratulations.
We come in different heights. Thank you, Rick. This is a great honor, and I'm humbled. When I was young, when I was in high school, there were two general categories of things that I like to read. Comic books, or graphic novels, as we call them now, and publications of the U.S. Naval Institute. The design histories of Norman Friedman, the novels of, the name escapes me at the moment, Tom Clancy, yes, thank you. And Fleet Tactics, the first edition by Wayne Hughes, a very influential book on my thinking. And to have the opportunity to distill thoughts that I had gathered from that and from the study of history and from the old pages of proceedings, and to create a book like this. I'm just very appreciative of the opportunities that the Naval Institute has given me, that all of you, through your participation, have created. So thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Richard Latour, Editor-in-Chief of Naval History Magazine. Today it's my honor to recognize the sacrifice and accomplishments of a great and beloved man. As some of you know, Admiral Daly makes a point personally to thank those who achieved 50 years of membership in the Naval Institute. During one of these conversations a couple of years ago, the Admiral asked retired Naval Reserve Lieutenant Carl Skip Schumacher about his naval service. "Oh, I served in a supply ship making runs in the Tonkin Gulf, and then I transferred to a former cargo ship," he replied. "It was the AGER, the AGER-2, the Pueblo?" Admiral Daly asked. "Yes, indeed. Skip Schumacher was operations officer on board the spy ship 51 years ago, when he was a 24-year-old Lieutenant JG. North Korea held him and the rest of those on board prisoner for 11 months. Follow-up emails and phone calls I exchanged with Lieutenant Schumacher resulted in his article, Hellenbach, which posthumously has earned him Naval History Author of the Year honors. A native of St. Louis, Skip Schumacher sadly passed away in May 2018, several months after his article was published. He was a graduate of Trinity College, where he majored in religious studies. After serving in the Navy, he earned an MBA from Harvard Business School and had a long career in banking and finance. Hellenbach, which commemorated the 50th anniversary of the Pueblo incident, serves as a reminder of North Korea's history of lawlessness and brutality. Lieutenant Schumacher delivers a gripping account of the attack on and capture of the Pueblo in international waters. He goes on to recollect the severe beatings and interrogations endured by the ship's officers, enlisted men, and 2 civilian oceanographers. The author also describes how the prisoners were forced to write and sign numerous false confessions and apologies, sit for stage photos, and make television appearances. But according to Schumacher, the Pueblo's skipper, Commander Lloyd Bucher, created a mandate of resistance that resulted in the prisoners largely foiling North Korea's attempts to make them propaganda pawns. This included using stilted, archaic, and outlandish language in their confessions and apologies, which were written collaboratively. What Lieutenant Schumacher did not reveal in his article was the extent of his own creative involvement in the writing. According to Commander Bucher, Skip was by far our most skillful man with words. His theological studies had given him a command of biblical language, which, combined with his sharp wit, resulted in long-winded, flowery verbosity, signifying absolutely nothing. After the crew's release in December 1968, Lieutenant Schumacher received the Silver Star for his conspicuous gallantry during the attack on the Pueblo, and the Bronze Star for his defiance and total resistance toward his captors. Today, we're honored to have with us a survivor of the Pueblo ordeal, oceanographer Harry Iredale. Could you please stand, Mr. Iredale? Also here is the son of Pueblo Seaman Robert Hill, Commander Josh Hill. Josh Hill, could you please stand? Right here in the back. Accepting the Author of the Year award on Lieutenant Schumacher's behalf are his son, John Schumacher, and stepdaughter, Irene Allen.
Well, we're tall. Skip was snarky. If anyone who knows Skip, he knows he was snarky. He was irreverent every moment of every day without ever once being disrespectful. And he rode this perfect line. And I called him our smooth glass lake because of his ability to get through horrible situations with silly comments. We were reminded of this when he was dying. He saw how scared and sad we were. And he cracked jokes in order to, show the nursing staff that he was a smart, coherent man. He cracked jokes to remind us to take squeeze every smile you can out of any horrible situation, no matter who you might think you're offending. And also he cracked jokes so that he indelibly embedded these smiles into the memory of this horrible experience. He luckily died very quickly and peacefully. It was about 3 weeks. He went to the office one day, 3 weeks later, boom, gone. So it was very fast and very scary. And I was going to give quite a different speech until I had dinner with someone who was in the Navy on Monday and was reminded that not everyone in the Navy believed that the Pueblo crew were an example of what to do when captured. And fuming on the heels of that, I'd like to say thank you so much from us, from the families, for everyone who did think these guys were heroes, because they are. And Skip conducted himself with honor every moment of every day. And I think in his irreverence, he'd say that since this award was posthumous, his record with the U.S. Navy is perfect. Thank you.
I'll just add that it's an honor to be here on behalf of our father. We thank the Naval Institute and accept this award as humbly inadequate stand-ins for him. As mentioned, he was a lifelong 50-plus year member of U.S. Naval Institute. He would have been very proud to receive this. Our father literally gave the North Koreans the middle finger. Given the chance to speak today, I think he would have told you that the Pueblo incident could be a case study of American actions and also missteps in the Cold War, one that should be preserved and learned from. He would point out, as he did at the conclusion of every speech that he gave or talk on it, that the crew never did receive a formal apology or acknowledgement from the Navy for their actions. And he would also say that the crew of the Pueblo performed honorably and loyally throughout the attack, capture, and captivity. Their resistance to beatings, torture, and exploitation was led by their commanding officer, Captain Bucher. Speaking on Bucher's cunning, intelligence, and quick-wittedness, our father wrote, "He pumped back fight into this beaten crew. By force of his own example, he restored their emotional life, their pride in being American Navy men." Bucher leveraged the crew's uniquely American traits, fierce independence, indignance in the face of an opposed enemy, and free minds that were intelligent and had the freedom to think creatively and critically. Our father was sent to a situation he was not adequately prepared for, was held prisoner by people that had a lifelong hatred for him, and was brutally beaten, but he was not alone. He was with a highly intelligent and creative crew. They got each other through it, and he was proud to be a part of it. Their efforts to undermine an enemy did not come from training, but from the heart of every American. Skip Schumacher was proud to call himself an American Navy man. Thank you.
And that is why I love working at the Naval Institute. I'm Bill Hamblett. I'm the editor-in-chief of Proceedings, and I'm very pleased to announce the 2018 Proceedings Author of the Year, Captain John Cordell, U.S. Navy, retired. It would have been hard to read Proceedings Magazine, Proceedings Online, or the Naval Institute blog last year and not see an outstanding article or commentary by John. He was prolific. Starting in January, he wrote 4 feature articles, 6 Proceedings Today commentaries, and 5 blog articles. John's insights from his 2 command tours and his positions as former Director of Personnel and then Maintenance and then Chief of Staff for Surface Force Atlantic have made him an authority on manning, maintenance, man-machine interfaces, circadian watch rotations, the need for sleep, and leadership. His articles are insightful, easy to read, and full of humility. Although retired from the Navy, John continues to work on the waterfront in Norfolk, training surface warfare officers on shipboard maintenance at the basic division officer course, all the way up through Major Command. He also helps develop authors and leaders who dare to read, think, speak, and write. John personally has mentored several proceedings authors, many of them very junior authors, and he's inspired others. As the proceedings editorial team and editorial board considered the possible candidates for this year's Author of the Year, the choice was easy and clear: John Cordell. John, please join me.
Wow. So this is the very definition of a tough act to follow, but I'll try. I'll be brief because I'm double parked over there. Bill, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. You know, I look back at the newly refurbished webpage and realize I guess I've written 63 articles over the years, starting in 1995. It was an article about my pep tour in Germany, where I met my wife Gudrun, who I have to thank out front for putting up with me for the last 25 years. My most recent article was Captain Get Some Sleep, keyword sleep, as Bill pointed out. A collaboration with Dr. Nita Shattuck, who's been a friend and a mentor of mine for many years and has done wonderful things for the Navy. My most personal article, and I think the most important one from the list from this last year, the Navy must put lives before litigation, talking about how our legal process sometimes stands in the way of our ability to learn lessons and share lessons from our mishaps. But tonight I want to call out a couple of junior sailors because in my mind, it's easy for an old guy like me or Kevin Iyer to pop out an article. What have we got to lose, right? But you talk to some of the E5s, the junior officers, I want to call some attention to a couple of those folks who ought to be standing right here. Petty Officer Elizabeth Heck, a mistake should not kill a sailor's career. Operations Specialist Carolina Rodriguez, eradicate sexual assault in the military. One survivor speaks out. Midshipman Paul Kenny, recent improvements to SWO training are not enough. Written by someone who was aboard one of the two ships that had a collision. So, you know, these junior folks, they put it on the line and they want to make the Navy better. It takes a lot of courage. So I'd like to, if you get a chance to go look at those, please. If you're a senior person, resist the urge to put a snarky comment on the website about how inexperienced and naive these folks are. Instead, invite them over for a cup of coffee, because whatever they wrote down is about half of what they had to say. And finally, at this point in my life, there's no award that would mean more to me than this, because when I write an article, it's to try to make the Navy better, try to help the lives of the sailors, and that's exactly what Admiral Daly, Admiral Stavridis, Bill, and the editorial staff, who take my inputs, which I think Bill recently described as rambling and unfocused. I'm not lying. But they turn them into English and they publish them, and I thank you for reading them and appreciate the evening.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce the winners of the 2018 General Prize Essay Contest. Since 1879, this contest has been the Naval Institute's flagship essay contest. The list of past winners reads like a who's who of famous naval thought leaders. Commander Alfred Thayer Mahan won the contest in its first year. Lieutenant Ned Beach, Rear Admiral Stephen B. Luce, Lieutenant Ernest J. King, Lieutenant Commander, later Senator Sam Stratton, Captain Wayne Hughes, Lieutenant Commander Jim Stavridis, Commander Sandy Winnefeld, Rear Admiral Jerry Holland are a few names of winners you all recognize. The General Prize Essay Contest is funded by Andrew and Barbara Taylor and the Crawford Taylor Foundation, and we thank them for their proud and consistent sponsorship. Every year, this contest makes the point of a slogan we use on the Proceedings podcast: victory begins at the Naval Institute. Like all our essay contests, the General Prize Essay Contest is judged in the blind. The editorial members and editorial board members and the proceedings staff were very happy this year to see when we opened the envelopes that this year's winners spanned from a baby boomer who has written for proceedings for decades, to a millennial who started writing for us 2 years ago, to an iGen whiz kid who hit the jackpot with his first essay. All three of these winning essays are in the May issue of Proceedings, which will hit your mailboxes and our website next week. This year's third place winner is Captain George Galderisi, U.S. Navy retired. George started writing for Proceedings in 1978. His essay is titled, "The Navy Needs Artificial Intelligence, It Just Doesn't Know Why." George works at SPAWAR in San Diego. He couldn't be here tonight, unfortunately, but he'll receive a medal, a check for $2,000, and George is already a life member of the Naval Institute. So please applaud George Galderisi. This year's second place winner is Lieutenant Commander Graham Scarborough, U.S. Navy. Graham is an F-18 Super Hornet weapons systems officer. He's currently assigned to Strike Fighter Wing Atlantic at Naval Air Station Oceana. Graham wrote several Proceedings articles for us in 2018. He wrote a number of humorous blog posts. He's wicked funny. His essay for this contest is called "Go Straight at 'Em: Training and Operating with Mission Command." It's a hard-hitting piece that argues that future naval battles will require a high degree of autonomy. Leaders of squadrons and surface action groups and their component units will have to make decisions without explicit guidance from above. In such a scenario, the admirals above these deciders must be as comfortable with uncertainty as their subordinates are operating without instructions. Graham receives a medal, a check for $3,000, and a one-year extension to his Naval Institute membership. Graham.
You identified me as a millennial, so I will read my notes off of my phone. Famed military strategist Mike Tyson once said, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth." The history of our Navy and of war at sea indicate that signals will frequently not be seen nor understood, a truth that has proven itself time and again since Nelson's instructions before Trafalgar. In the absence of communication, commanders should place their ships alongside the enemy and fight. We must be ready to fight in the blind without the radio, internet, and PowerPoint we've come to expect through 30 years of information dominance. The way to prepare is to train and operate through commander's intent, which I argue can be learned and practiced in both everyday operations and in training. The time to wean ourselves off of information addiction is now, before an adversary forces us to cope without the information we've grown to rely upon. Thank you to the Naval Institute for this opportunity. I'm honored to be here with such remarkable people, and I'm truly humbled by this award. Thanks to my wife, Jamie, and my 3 kids who couldn't be here tonight for letting me write in between work and soccer practice and mowing the lawn and all the other stuff that comes with being a dad to 3 kids. And for their steadfast support during my years of service. Thanks to my parents, Kurt and Pam, who provided my first glimpse of a life of naval service. Thanks to Captain Hamlet for encouraging me, and to Jen Pompey at the blog and at the Institute for her continual help with editing, encouragement, last-minute emails, and copy changes. And I have to thank my favorite teachers, Diane Seppi, Susie Getsky, and Connie McBride, who encouraged me to find my voice 20 years ago at Broaden High School. When they learn that I won a prize with an essay that quotes Mike Tyson, a children's book, the movie Office Space, and talks about admirals getting killed by falling anvils, they probably will roll their eyes and say, "That sounds about right." Think, read, and write. Don't fear the consequences. We're blessed with a tradition of dialogue and ideas. As Mr. Schumacher said just a moment ago, free minds, a hallmark of Americans in general and the Navy in particular. Thank you.
Finally, the first place winner of this year's General Prize Essay Contest is Mr. Hunter Stiers. Hunter is a student at Columbia University and a fellow at the John B. Hattendorf Center for Maritime Historical Research at the Naval War College. His essay, "The South China Sea Needs a Coin Toss," describes China's efforts to assert national sovereignty over the South China Sea as a maritime insurgency that demands an effective counterinsurgency from the United States and its partners in the region. Hunter receives a gold medal, a check for $6,000, and a one-year extension to his membership in the Naval Institute. Hunter, congratulations.
Thank you so much. This award is a profound honor, and it is a privilege to have the opportunity to present this new strategic concept to this vital community. At stake in the South China Sea today is the future of the freedom of the sea, a fundamental U.S. national interest for which this country has gone to war no less than 6 times. This is a conflict of world historical importance, one that we cannot afford to lose. Yet our current approach isn't working, and our freedom of navigation operations are not having a meaningful impact on the constituencies that will decide the outcome. However, our failure thus far is not final. Our recovery starts by coming to a new understanding of the core nature of the threat in order to reorient our strategy to defeat it. The essence of my argument is this. China is waging a maritime insurgency to overturn the prevailing regime of international law and undo the freedom of the sea. While its other activities like island building in the Spratly Islands get all the attention, China's decisive line of effort is in fact its forcible coercion of local civilian mariners who exercise the rights guaranteed by international law more than anyone else. With the threat identified as a maritime insurgency, it follows that our strategy should be one of maritime counterinsurgency, positioning our forces to protect civilians as they exercise their rights under the free and open international legal regime that we seek to uphold. All this will, of course, be far easier said than done. But while the phrase maritime insurgency may be new, American Blue Jackets and Marines have faced similar challenges before and developed innovative strategies to overcome them. And we are most fortunate to have at our disposal vibrant communities of thought, like the U.S. Naval Institute, to mobilize our intellectual capital. I look forward to the conversations to come, both in this room this evening and beyond. Thank you very much.
Now I turn the podium over to the chair of our board, Admiral Stavridis.
Good afternoon again, and it is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this afternoon, who is someone well known to this community, currently the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. Ellen Lord, the Honorable Ellen Lord, is known for her 30-plus years of superb activity and service in the defense industry, including her time as the CEO of Textron when I first came to know her particularly well. We were both up in New England together, I at the Fletcher School, she running Textron quite capably. And it was a series of conversations we had, and she eventually became part of our Naval Institute family and was a very strong supporter of the Naval Institute, something that continues to this day and is reflected by her kindness in coming on a busy spring afternoon. I know there's a lot going on in the building right now, particularly in your remit. It's very quiet, I'm sure. Yet here you are, and we appreciate that deeply. Ellen Lord, I think, personifies the fact that not only those who wear the uniform serve the nation, but also so many who serve, in my view, in the defense industry, likewise serve the nation. And thus, let me conclude this introduction by asking all of you to say thank you for your service with a big round of applause to the Honorable Ellen Lord.
Thank you, Jim, and good afternoon. I'm so pleased to be here. I appreciate the invitation, and I'm really honored and humbled to be amongst so many people that have both the courage and the discipline to both write and publish. And that's what I love about the Naval Institute, really keeping that going. In my role as Undersecretary for Acquisition and Sustainment, role I've had for about 18 months now, I fundamentally see two key objectives that I'm trying to fulfill. One is to get warfighting capability downrange as quickly and cost-effectively as possible. Secondly, it's my responsibility to ensure that we have both a secure and a resilient defense industrial base. And there were some comments about China just a few minutes ago. One of our key challenges today is China. I don't think the average American totally realizes that right now we have a huge threat to the way we do business, to our national security, to global security through what's going on with China, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. But in a job like this, where I have got a portfolio of about $2 trillion of major defense acquisition programs, you want to focus and make sure that you can have some impact. So the way we do that is to look to the National Defense Strategy at the 3 lines of effort and then line up the work we do underneath of that. And I think it's extremely easy to sit around conference room tables and kind of think great thoughts and write up all sorts of policies and so forth, but I think it's far more important to really dive into the real work of the department. So what I've done is to identify a few key efforts under each of the lines of effort. So line of effort number 1 is lethality. Make no doubt about it, we are warfighters. So how do we deliver lethality to the force quickly and cost effectively? I have chosen to spend most of my time on 2 key areas. One is the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, the premier fighter aircraft in the world today. It's an unusual program for the department in that when it was initially conceived, we had many international partners. We today have 3 areas of focus. One is on production. We need to make sure that we use best business practices to get the aircraft produced as quickly as possible and as cost effectively as possible. So when we talk about doing business, we need to make sure that we use the best business practices. So one of our focus areas is how we contract and how we use the tools we have to make sure we motivate the performance that we need from the industrial base. We have an acquisition workforce that has an enormous number of acquisition authorities and contract types to use, but we don't always fully train people on how to use those. So what we're doing in the F-35 is to make sure we take some of the fee structures that we can use and apply them to the type of performance we are looking for. So now in Lot 11, which we're producing right now and moving forward into Lot 12, no longer do we just give a fee once an aircraft is delivered. Our key prime contractor, Lockheed Martin, has to earn that fee by making sure they only take a certain number of days through certain stages of the process. Quality has to be to a certain level. We're looking at sustainment and taking a very data-driven process and making sure that we hone in on what matters to the warfighter. That's mission capability. We use metrics of 80% mission capability, and we're driving performance to get that. We are measuring what it costs per flight hour. We are driving down towards $25,000 per flight hour, what a 4th generation aircraft typically we pay for today. We're also looking at development and making sure that we continue to have the sensor systems, that we have the weapon systems that will maintain that overmatch both for the U.S. and our allies and partners. So what we're doing is pulling software development, really a key thread that runs across all of our different warfighting systems. We're pulling that into modern, contemporary ways of doing business, not just waterfall, typical software development, but agile and DevOps, where we are actually coding every day and testing every night. This is causing us to manage our contracts a little bit differently. Right now, those of you that have ever worked with acquisition know that we have certain types of money that Congress makes sure we spend only certain dollars for development, certain budgets for production, and others for sustainment. When you do modern software development, you are every day developing, producing, and sustaining software code. So we are working right now with Congress to come up with a software color of money. One of the things I didn't realize when I came into this job with a background in business is that unlike business where you have a board of directors that might be 10, 20 people, when you work at DOD, you have over 400 people in your board of directors, and they're called the Senate and the House of Representatives. So there are a lot of people that you have the opportunity to talk with, get direction from, and try to influence to get what you need in terms of statute to do the job you want to do. So F-35, so important to the Department of Defense as well as our allies and partners, one area of focus to do business a little bit differently. The other area of focus is our nuclear triad. For decades, we have neglected what we have in terms of our nuclear infrastructure. And we are very, very dependent on other parts of the government, such as the Department of Energy, for all of the nuclear materials that go into our warheads or into the power systems for our new submarines or for aircraft carriers. So I spend quite a bit of time looking at B-21 bomber, new aircraft to deliver nuclear weapons. F-35, again, is what we call a dual-capable aircraft, able to deliver nuclear weapons not only for us, but again, for our allies and partners. Looking at Minuteman III replacement, which is called ground-based strategic deterrent, and looking at how we continue to preserve the funding, how we build those products very quickly, looking at long-range standoff weapon, which replaces the Alcom. What we need to do, particularly in this environment where now we have a Democratic House and a Republican Senate, is to make sure we preserve those dollars to have our nuclear deterrence so that we can achieve peace through strength. So I spend much of my time up on the Hill talking about why these programs are important. I have the opportunity to go to hearings. Another thing I didn't realize I would be spending so much time doing in this job, which is quite exciting. Somehow senators and congressmen change their posture a little bit once the TV cameras are turned on and you're sitting there. So quite a learning experience for that. So, line of effort number one, lethality, looking at F-35, looking at the nuclear triad, which we're modernizing. Line of effort number two is strengthening alliances and partnerships. We have a history as a nation of prevailing when we go to war because we go to war with our allies and partners. Geopolitically, we are in very, very dynamic times. Some of our key allies now we have huge challenges with. Turkey, very, very important ally to us for many, many years, is contemplating, I will say, buying an S-400 system from Russia, an air defense system. That is incompatible with us allowing Turkey to have the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. Turkey has been a partner on our program. So right now, we're in the midst of adjudicating how do we come to an agreement about this. A day-to-day discussion. We're very hopeful that Turkey will make the right decision, but again, a complex geopolitical environment. When we look at our allies and partners, we are incredibly linked on the nuclear front as well. I'm not sure that the average American realizes that during World War II, the UK sent over about 130 scientists and engineers to Los Alamos. We would have never developed the nuclear weapon without them. To this day, we supply the UK with nuclear warheads. The UK is developing a new submarine, the Dreadnought. We have a common missile chamber with them on our new Columbia-class submarine. So we stay very, very, very linked. A lot of my time is spent with allies and partners. In my role, I'm what we call our National Armaments Director, which means I represent the U.S. at NATO. Every 6 months, I'm at NATO working with allies and partners in a variety of areas. One of the ways that I support the U.S. is through making sure that we sell our weapon systems to our allies and partners, especially as we move into a multi-domain interoperable fight here. We need common control systems. We need common communication systems. So I help work with U.S. industry to make sure that a lot of European nations who cannot afford to buy weapon systems themselves can form consortia and work with us and buy systems together. We're also, interestingly enough, at NATO now very much focused on China and the threat China poses to both our commercial as well as our military business security. We, on a mill-to-mill level, have a very clear understanding of the threats posed by Chinese software in our systems where there are back doors, Chinese drones that send all information back to China. The average citizen of each of these nations does not have that understanding. This has particularly come to light as we move from 4G to 5G. So lots and lots of information we're sharing. We are very lucky in the U.S. that our interagency works closely together. The Department of Defense spends a lot of time working with Department of State. We spend time with Treasury. We spend time with DOJ so that when we see issues, we come with a whole of government solution to that. The third line of effort is reform, and it's probably no coincidence that I was asked to take this job because I'm from industry. It was a huge surprise to me. I never ever expected to get a call asking me to take the job, and in fact, when I first got it, I said, oh, thank you very much, but no thank you. And then I reflected on it for a while, and after having spent quite a bit of time in the aerospace and defense industry, I decided that all those comments I had made over the years, all those ideas I had, that maybe it was time to put it into action. And once you get inside the Pentagon, you realize it's a far more complex environment than it is when you're sitting on the outside. But the idea is I want industry to succeed. I want industry to do what the warfighter needs industry to do. So to that end, I spend quite a bit of time working with industry associations like AIA, NDIA, PSC to make sure that we have that communication, because that is what is so critical. We don't often articulate what's critical to us as the Department of Defense in a way that industry can understand it. So case in point, cybersecurity is probably the largest emerging threat we have. A an enormous amount of time and energy within the building is going into cybersecurity. However, we have these high-level NIST standards that we say industry has to comply with. It is not particularly easy to understand how to comply with 120-some separate requirements. So what I've mandated is this year we will come up with a national cybersecurity standard with metrics, and we will develop third-party independent auditors who can go and audit against those cybersecurity standards. This is very similar to ISO standards for quality. In that way, we will be able to discriminate between a company that is really cyber secure and one that is not. Now, while I say that, I also realize that small business is really our innovation engine. And if we levy all of our requirements on many small businesses, we will literally put them out of business. Or we will push them to the edge of where it is just too difficult to do work with the Department of Defense, so I'm not going to go there. So that's on us to figure out how to make it easier. One of the projects we have going on is to actually set up enclaves in clouds with a lot of, without getting into too much detail, but hardened containers that are software tools that we can allow business to go into our government cloud, basically like government furnished equipment, and do software development in our cloud using our stack, which would give an automatic authority to operate. In that way, we've provided the secure environment to allow small businesses to work with us in a very safe and secure way. We are working to be able to make this type of methodology readily available, because unless we have safe and secure software which permeates all of our platforms, all of our weapons systems, we will be vulnerable to cyber attacks. So a whole variety of different things that we are doing along those lines. I'm very excited to say that we have incredible partnership from Congress. We have a lot of support to simplify and streamline our acquisition process. One of the other mandates I've put out for this year is that we will rewrite DOD 5000.02, which is our acquisition policy and all the instructions to go along with it. It is an incredibly thick, lengthy legalese type document to work with. And we have our acquisition workforce who are very, very concerned about being compliant with law, and they go through a very, very lengthy process on most programs. And we sort of have glibly said in the past, well, just tailor that down and use what you need. Well, you don't know what you don't know, and it's rather threatening to say that. So what I've said is we are rewriting 5000.02 from scratch. What we are doing is coming up with flow diagrams of if you need to do this, then that. Yes, no, so that we get to the simplest way to get through the acquisition process with model contracts, with standard clauses, so that we can move much more quickly and much more simply. Every time I get to a huge problem program that's had a Nunn-McCurdy breach or has all kinds of cost and timing problems, there's usually a very crummy contract at the basis of that. So this is what we need to teach the workforce to do, and we've got to simplify it. So we're rewriting this, and we're going to have model contracts, standard language, and we are really reinventing the Defense Acquisition University, where we kind of lock people down for 8, 12, 16 weeks at Fort Belvoir and kind of kill them with PowerPoints. What we're doing is we're breaking our curricula up into modules, and no kidding, teaching people things they need to go and use tomorrow? What's a standard cybersecurity clause I can have in my program? How do I write a request for proposal that when I award that contract, I will not have a protest? What I'm doing is bringing in practitioners, kind of adjunct professors, to be guest lecturers, so that we want real practitioners who will talk about what didn't go right as well as what did go right. One of human nature's typical kind of sort of modes of operation is to only talk about the good stuff, don't talk about the bad stuff. If we don't talk about what went wrong on contracts, where we had problems, we're doomed to make the same mistakes again and again. So a whole series of initiatives. I'll stop talking on that, and I thought I would open it up and hopefully have a few Q&As. Okay? All right. Thank you. All right, Megan, I knew I could count on you.
I always have a question for you. You spoke at the very beginning about the health of the industrial base. For the Navy specifically, I know there's a lot of programs such as the submarine industry where, smaller vendors that are needed both for maintenance and new construction, there may be only one vendor, they may be struggling to keep up with demand. So at the Pentagon level, how are you working with those companies to either help them grow or to encourage other companies to get into that sector?
Okay, so the fragility of the defense industrial base is something that we are concerned about. And in fact, President Trump, about a year and a half ago, put out an executive order directing DOD to work with the interagency to really look at the health of the defense industrial base. It was EO 13806. We led that out of industrial policy in Acquisition and Sustainment, published a report that I'm really proud of last year. And the reason I believe it's significant is because it actually segmented the industrial base, which is a big, large thing that's hard to talk about. Now we have a common lexicon for addressing the industrial base, and we've identified where we have fragility. A whole number of issues there. We might be sole source to China on certain rare earth metals. We might have only one company that produces critical energetics. So what we've done is use the report to guide us to what we need to look at to shore up. So we have an implementation plan that came right out of it. We use that as a way to talk to industry. One of the things I do is quarterly take about 15 people from the Pentagon, from service acquisition executives from all the services to defense contract management agency, across the board, and we go and sit down with about 30 CEOs from large, medium, and small companies, and we talk about these kinds of issues, because often these companies might not have a problem with their first level suppliers, but about 6 levels down in the supply chain, they do have a problem. So what we've helped to do is to shine a light on that. But okay, you identify the problem, then what do you do about the problem? We are pointing to authorities we have, like DPA Title III, IBAS, different pots of money we have where we can shore up some of these areas. We also, and I think this is really the most innovative thing we're going to do, we haven't rolled it out, we'll probably roll it out in about another 3-4 weeks or so. We are creating a trusted capital marketplace where we have a list of companies from a whole series of different industry segments that need capital infusion. And the actual business case analysis is such that it doesn't attract a lot of typical investors. But we're very, very fortunate that we have a lot of patriotic venture capitalists in this world, a lot of families with funds that they want to invest, and they're interested in understanding where they can invest in our nation's industrial base to make a difference towards our safety and security. So we are creating a marketplace to bring these two groups together to help with that. Navy specifically, we have just had a whole series of conversations with GD and HII in the recent past, because we meet with them on a regular basis as well, with the number of subs and aircraft carriers, the demand not only for production but for sustainment, on how we support them, whether it be training programs at the local level, whether it be standing up some of their sub-tier systems. So we're doing it by the data. We don't like to have fact-free discussions. So what we do is we take the data, we look where the biggest problem is, we Pareto that, and we work down it. So that is very, very aggressively being worked with the primes right now, aided by the data we've generated through the 13806 report and a variety of other mechanisms.
Secretary Lord, could you comment on space-based systems and what you're doing in that area?
Space is the new frontier. We are spending, as you probably have read, quite a bit of time talking about space development agencies, space forces, space comm. We have made the decision that if Congress supports us, we are standing up Space Force underneath of the Air Force. We are standing up a space development agency that is somewhat similar to the Missile Defense Agency, all in early days right now working through it. Why are we doing this? Because there is a very significant threat in space. We not only have military equities in space, we have a lot of commercial equities in space. We are adjudicating what we want in LEO, MEO, HEO, and other orbits as well. We are working through a space architecture. We are looking at critical technologies that will enable that. So an extremely active area right now, not only from the administrative overall architecture of how we're going to run our space operation, if you will, but also a focus on how do we very quickly procure critical capability, how do we develop the fundamental technology and then apply it to space to make sure we have all sensor capabilities, weapon capabilities, communication capabilities that we need. So very, very active area that the leadership team at the Pentagon is meeting on regularly and very, very actively discussing with the Hill right now. Yes.
Madam Secretary, talking about contracting, for decades a discussion has been ongoing over what kind of contract to use when dealing with the defense industrial base. On the one hand, we have the cost-plus contract, which does not seem to provide that many incentives. On the other hand, we have the fixed-price contract. But had one insisted on that a couple of decades ago, maybe Lockheed would not have survived, and we would not have that kind of F-35 either. Would you want to comment on this kind of fundamental
I love the fact that you asked this question, because I go back to the fact that our acquisition workforce doesn't always have the benefit of understanding all the different tools we have in the toolbox, if you will. So we have codified all of our different acquisition authorities and contract types under something that we call the Adaptive Acquisition Framework. So it's a one-pager where you can see everything from JUONs and GEONs, joint emerging operational needs, joint urgent operational needs, to middle-tier acquisition, to typical 5,000, all the way through using other contract actions to fixed price. When you get back to cost plus and fixed price, kind of two ends of the spectrum, they are designed to be used and applied for different types of programs. In a cost plus contract, what you're doing is you're paying the actual cost plus a fee on top of that. You typically would only do that when you have a development contract where you are looking at technology where there there are unknown unknowns. So you typically would have a very hard time getting companies to bid on a fixed price contract for a very difficult development. So we have cost plus for development contracts where there's unknown technology, unknown manufacturing, and so forth. We use fixed price where we believe there are many fewer unknowns and where many more industry partners could bid on it. Then we have the ability to use all different types of fee structures on fixed price contracts. So I was mentioning F-35 earlier and how we have incentive fees where Lockheed has to earn their fee. You can also do just fixed fee where you get a fee when you deliver. You can do award fee where you have some guidelines, but then you have a meeting and you decide what percentage. So it really comes down to risk and reward and getting the calculus right on that.
Madam Secretary, Captain Josh Taylor, reading Proceedings magazine, it seems clear to, I think, most readers that the future of warfare equipment is fast, cheap, disposable, open architecture, mass. Yet our current approach, specifically in Congress and industry, is committed to these legacy systems that are exquisite, custom, long-lived. How is DoD and your office incentivizing industry and Congress to make this paradigm shift to really what seems to be the future direction of warfare?
I'm not sure it's one size fits all. Fast, cheap, high volume, quality or quantity has a quality all of its own if you're talking about, little small swarming UAS or something like that. But it frankly comes down to a balance because there's a force projection question here. I don't think anyone would argue that our submarines give us an incredible advantage through stealth. That's a large, exquisite platform that I don't think we're going to do away with soon. Might do lots of little ones too, but you need some of the large ones to project the force, have the ability to launch key weapons and so forth. On the other hand, we need attritable, disposable, very low-cost systems. It's really fundamentally goes back to a strategy where you identify the threat, and then you decide what your strategy is in terms of an O plan to address that, and what is the capability that you need to execute that mission. And if you read the National Defense Strategy, you'll see that we have a lot of dynamic force planning now, for instance, where you'll see ships coming back into dock and then all of a sudden turning around 45, 60 days later. You see Army units deploying on very short notice to Europe. We're being a little bit less predictable in what we're doing. We need some of the bigger systems to do that. We need some of the smaller systems. And the real key is how do you model, how do you war game? We have incredible abilities to do war gaming right now that is incredibly realistic. And what's critical about that war gaming is that you get key people around the table that, no kidding, would be there when the worst day happens, and you go through these scenarios and everybody's got to play out their position and see the what ifs. We've done some incredible space games of that nature and so forth. So I don't think it's as simple as saying we're doing a total paradigm shift from one to the other. It's what's the mix. But when you talk about those smaller, cheaper, high volume systems, we have to be able to contract to do that. And that's why we use things like GSA schedules. That's why you see us doing some of these kinds of speed dating programs with small businesses and awarding contracts on the spot. We have to have the tools to do it all, but it's not quite so simple as to say, we're going to just dock all of those aircraft carriers tomorrow because that's yesterday.
Thank you.
Yep.
We've all heard the tragedy of the Boeing 747 MAX and the automated intelligence anti-stall system. With our military aircraft, are we making sure that we have an adequate human interface for automated systems and adequate training?
Absolutely. One of the differences between commercial business and defense business is the amount of time we take to model and test. Often when people say you're not fielding quickly enough, why do these programs take so long? It's because we have quite a safety margin, because we aren't just flying, from Boston to LA. We're flying downrange in not so great spots with not nearly as much infrastructure and service. So you can rest assured that every time there's a commercial incident, the military is watching, learning from that as well. And I have great faith not only in our aviators, but the people who are building and maintaining our aircraft.
Madam Secretary, you talked at length about the value of the F-35 program. Could you expound on the Pentagon's commitment to the F-15EX program and how the two aircraft might work together?
Well, the interesting thing about the F-35 is, being a fifth-gen aircraft, it makes all the fourth-gen aircraft it flies with better. I was out at Hill Air Force Base meeting with some of our longest-hour pilots on the F-35, and they were going through a bunch of classified briefings on a lot of scenarios they had flown, and basically showed how they could pass sensor information to the fourth-gen and get fourth-gen information back and pass it along. So there's always this issue of a high-low mix and a return on your investment. We have a lot of sort of denied access areas and so forth, but then we have some less exquisite missions as well. And it's our job to understand, with the limited dollars we have, how you best deploy those dollars into kind of good, better, best capabilities. And what we're trying to do is find that sweet spot, and it's something we go through every single day.
Thank you.
I think Pete's coming to get me here.
Madam Secretary, how about we do one more question?
All right, one more.
So, Madam Secretary, I spent 30 years driving ships in the Navy, 8.5 years working for a major defense contractor. I'm not doing that anymore, but I am passionate about delivering capability as fast as possible. My concern is that my experience with RFPs that I saw over the last 8.5 years is the incentives are not there to industry to deliver capability, the best capability, the most cost-effective capability in the shortest period of time. And your reforms, all of the things you're talking about are fantastic. I would encourage you to try to figure out a way to incentivize industry to do that.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm in violent agreement with you, and to that end, that's why quarterly we meet with the CEOs at the 3 industry associations. The top 6 companies come in one a month for one-on-ones, and in fact, we actually even through AIA, PSC, and NDIA, invited all the corporate CFOs in because I didn't think their voice had been heard. We've had quite a bit of discussion over the last 6 to 9 months about performance-based payments versus progress-based payments, and my message to everybody is, you tell me how we better incentivize you to deliver the capability we need and make it mutually beneficial. So we are all ears. So I'm always interested in general comments, but it's just like the data. I'm looking for very specific ideas. So if they're specific ideas, bring them in and we'll talk about it. That's what we're looking for. So thank you. All right, thank you, Pete. All right.
Something to tell you and give you. Madam Secretary, you have immense responsibilities, and we know your time is precious, and we thank you on behalf of the membership of the Naval Institute for making time for us today. And as a token of our appreciation, we wanted to give you this Naval Institute Press book,
Excellent.
Learning War by Trent Hone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank our sponsors once again, USAA, Lockheed Martin, and Leonardo DRS. I want to thank all our members, guests, and friends who are here tonight at our 146th annual meeting. And at this time, I'd like to close the presentation portion of the meeting and invite you all to the reception outside. Thank you very much.